Hey kids, Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. Now I've been a very lucky boy again of late because I've got to borrow this brand new Tiger 1200 from those nice people up at Hinckley at Triumph for the last few weeks. I've really got to ride the bike quite a lot in all sorts of conditions and got to know the bike. So what I'm going to do in this video is give you my longer term review of the bike. Now I've got to know the machine, lived with it a little bit, ridden it in the dark, ridden it in the wet, ridden it on fast roads and slow, let you know a little bit about what I found out about the bike. So if you're interested in the Triumph Tiger 1200, the brand new 2018 model, stick around and stay tuned. So this is a bike that I've been wanting to ride ever since Triumph brought out the revamped version, announced it last year, I think at the NEC show in November. So this is the 2018 Triumph Tiger XCA. So this is the more kind of off-road focused machine, if you like. I was very interested to ride it because number one, I'm a massive Triumph fan. I love Triumphs generally. And number two, I've been a long-term GS owner for ages. So it's going to be very interesting to me to see how this compared to the GS. Anyway, more about that a bit later. So what I'm going to do in this video is take the bike into various scenarios, show you how the bike performs, you know, on various day-to-day tasks. And then once I've done that, I'll take you through what I found out about the cost of ownership. I'll tell you what the insurance costs are, how much it costs to service and so on, and come up with a figure for running the bike per month. And then I've got a list of pros and cons of the bike at the end of the video, the negatives and the positives that I found out about the bike. So if you're interested in the Triumph Tiger 1200, you're going to want to stay tuned.
So going through towns and cities on the big old Tiger 1200 perhaps isn't its most natural of habitats. It's not really a bike designed for urban work. Of course it can be done, as it can be done on any bike. But with the big old panniers that I've got on here at the moment, it's not the sort of bike you'd want to be doing any serious filtering on. Well, you might want to. I certainly would want to. But the bike is very manoeuvrable, so it's great for nipping around traffic like I just did there. And also at very slow speed, she's very stable as well. So great for the slow stuff, but threading it through traffic, not the best bike, it has to be said. It's not all doom and gloom when it comes to town and city riding on the Tiger 1200 though, because it is such a big old bike. It has great presence on the road, so people can see you coming, so that's a plus point. And you do sit very high up on the bike. You've got a commanding view of the traffic ahead, so you can work out what's going on. Not very well demonstrated behind this van, of course, but generally speaking you can see what's going on in the traffic ahead and sort of plan your route. All that said, is it a bike that you want to buy to go through towns and cities? No, of course not. It's too big and too heavy for that, but can be done. But if you want a commuter, you want a different bike to this one. So what's the big old Tiger like in the wet then? Well, much like any other motorcycle, pretty miserable. Let's face it, riding in wet weather like this is pretty horrible at the best of times. I hope you can see okay. Let me just clean the camera a bit. But I guess if you've got to ride in the wet, then bikes like this are the best bikes to be doing it on. Number one, you've got this massive front layer to protect you from the worst of the wet. So this big screen keeps a lot of the wet actually off your jacket and so on, which is nice, and the big front layer of the bike physically. And of course, the bike is laden with electronics to help you out in the wet. So I've got it in wet mode at the moment. If I hit the mode button, there we go. You can see we've got the little cloud is highlighted with the blue bit on the LCD. I hope you saw that, or the TFT I should say. And then of course you've got things like traction control and ABS as well to help you out. And frankly, in this sort of weather you need all that stuff, because the roads this time of year, oh, quickly hit by here, are pretty horrible. They've had salt on them, it's raining on the salt now, they're pretty slippery and pretty horrible. So personally, any help I can get electronically on these sort of roads I'm happy to have, especially when it comes to white lines like this as well. The other thing of course about these big old adventure bikes in the wet is they do chuck up a lot of water all over themselves, and I've not found an adventure bike yet that doesn't do that, and this is no exception. So unfortunately I'm going to have a real job on when I come to clean the bike. Now I've not ridden the bike in the wet on very fast roads, so I don't know if it actually throws the water particularly over your feet or whatever, or your legs or up your back, but I'm not noticing anything like that. It feels fairly, you know, I feel fairly protected. If you're going to ride in the wet, then why not do it on a bike like this? So thumbs up for what the Tiger offers for the wet rider. and so to one of my favourite subjects, cleaning the bike. Well, as you can see, the Tiger gets pretty dirty, particularly around the swing arm there and the shaft drive. So I used a slightly different technique to clean it this time. Rinsed her off as usual, and then I used the Auto Glim bike cleaner, and then what I did for a change was snow foamed it just to get in all the nooks and crannies. Then I used a very light setting on the jet wash just to rinse her off, and very careful not to defeat any seals or anything like that. And then afterwards she looked pretty good, but a very difficult bike to clean, it has to be said.
So one of the important considerations to take into account when you're looking to get yourself a big old adventure bike, if you're going to be using it for touring, and let's face it, lots of people do use these things for touring, then is the luggage on the bike. What's that like? Well, the Triumph luggage on the Tiger 1200 is of the big aluminium box type thing, and there are pros and cons with it. Now, let me just grab the pannier here. First thing that I thought about this when I saw it was the finish on it. It's, okay, they look kind of rugged, and I'm sure they are rugged and would take a real pounding, but these already are a bit scratched and a little bit tarnished looking. Now, these are the ones from this press bike, so they've probably never been looked after and never been cleaned in their life properly. So that's possibly, you know, the case. But I think if I had some of these, I want to get them lacquered or something, just to give them a little bit of protection and protect the surface finish of them. So that's the first thing. Something I do very much like about the panniers and indeed the top box on the Triumph Tiger is the way that they actually connect to the bike. Now, you do have all this scaffolding here, which is kind of a feature of adventure bikes. So I guess that kind of comes with the territory. But I like the way that they've actually implemented the clips here. So, for example, with the pannier here, all you do is you literally align these little lugs here with the bolts here, and it just literally snaps on. It's really easy to put on and off. There you go. And they all work in the same way. Obviously, the other side's the same way, and the top box works in a similar vein. So the actual method of connection is really straightforward on these. Top box, similar method. Just slides in there, like so, and down. There you go. Connected. And the same with this one. On with the bolts. And on. Nice and solid. Okay, so much for how they go on. What about space inside them? Okay, so much for how they go on. What they like inside. Well, let's have a look at the panniers then. First thing is, you have to use the key to actually get into them, which is a bit of a nuisance. This is where the whole keyless thing, in my mind, breaks down a little bit. But anyway, small point. Let's just get the key out, unlock it, and then it's this one here flicks up. And there we go. We've got that sort of lid arrangement. Let me just move the camera and show you in there. Okay, so there we have the inside of the pannier. Quite spacious, not as much room in there as in, for example, my the side cases on my GS, the Vario panniers that I've got. I don't know the figures to hand as to what the literage is in here, but for purposes of scale, here's a standard can of old Speckled End. There you go, and get plenty of beers in there. Anyway, yeah, quite a nice pannier, and I like the fact that they're top loading. That just makes life easier when you're out and about. You don't have to get everything out to when you just want to get a small thing out, you can leave everything else in there, if that makes sense. Okay, one last thing while we're on the subject of panniers, something that people always ask is, can you get a helmet in the top box? So, not panniers, top box. So let's have a look. Just open this one up again. Come on. There we go. Standard helmet for a large head, my old Shoei Quest. Yeah, fits in there absolutely fine. So yeah, that answers that question. Not a big fan of that clip. You can indeed fit, that's a right fiddle, you can indeed fit your helmet in there, so that answers that. As you can tell, I'm not a massive fan of the top box and the panniers. They are robust, but they're getting a little bit tarnished and they're a bit fiddly in terms of opening and closing them, but I do like the attachment points, so there we go, that's pretty much all I've got to say about the luggage on it.
So riding the big Tiger 1200 at night time then is really quite amazing. The lights on this are just incredible, really bright. I've had cars with worse headlights than this. I hope the GoPro is picking it up. I can see way ahead on the road, and of course I've got the little auxiliary lights switched on as well. If I turn those off, let's see if I can find the button for those, that one, there you go, auxiliary lights off, auxiliary lights on, auxiliary lights off, auxiliary lights on. It just fills in a lot of extra space at the front, so it makes for a really good lighting, so I like that a lot. Now I'll just turn the corner here and then we'll try the high beam, see how that looks. Okay, so that's dipped beam at the moment with the auxiliary lights on. If I go to high beam, wow, look at that, absolutely incredible. Now the high beam on this, you basically just press the button once and it goes to high, you press it again and it goes back down to dip. And let's just give it again. I don't want to dazzle that car there, but just wait till I pop by him. Okay, so that's dip and that's full beam. Absolutely brilliant, these lights. I've not seen better headlights on any bike, I think, so well done Trump for that. And then the other brilliant thing that Trump have to be commended for is for listening to people, because look at this switch gear. It's complicated on this bike and it's all lit at night. Now only KTM previously have I seen do that, and I've often moaned about that on reviews, that bike manufacturers don't do it. And on a big old bike like this that's got such complicated switch gear, actually having that lit up is really helpful, so well done Triumph on that, top marks. So riding the Tiger 1200 at night is a rare pleasure, because you can actually see where you're going. Well, the other thing of course is the TFT display goes to night mode, which is really nice on the Triumph. I like that, it's one of my favourite night presentations. So yeah, as I say, full marks to Triumph for riding the Tiger 1200 at night. They've actually put some thought into that, which is great to see.
Okay, so at the start of the video I said that I would give you my findings on the sort of cost of ownership. What are the costs that you can expect to have to pay if you buy a Tiger 1200 of this type? Well, I've done a bit of research on this so you don't have to. First off, road tax, or vehicle excise duty as I should call it. Because it's over 600cc, here in the UK you'll be paying £85 a year for your road tax. Insurance, went to my friends at Principal Insurance as usual and got myself a quote. This is just indicative because of course it's based on my situation here with the bike being in the garage in this part of the world that I live for my age with my no claims bonus, etc. But just indicative, they came up with a quote of £486 with a £350 excess, which I thought for a bike of this cost and CC was pretty good actually. That's one of the more competitive quotes that we've seen over the time that I've been doing reviews of big bikes. That's a pretty good cost. And then the other thing that I thought would be of interest to you is what about servicing? So I phoned up my local Triumph dealer, which is Hart's Triumph down in Hemel Hempstead, so hi to those guys and thanks very much for helping me out with this, and talked to them about the servicing. Now, number one, Triumph increased the service intervals on this bike. It actually now needs a service every 10,000 miles or annually, whichever comes sooner. Now, if you're like the vast majority of bikers, that probably means you're going to do it annually and not on the 10,000th anniversary, but it gets a bit complicated. Let me explain what they said. So first service, if you go to Hemel Triumph anyway, or Hart's Triumph, sorry, is at 500 miles, and that's parts only, and that costs about 60 quid, so I guess that's basically an oil change. So 60 quid for the first run-in service at 500 miles is what Hart's Triumph would charge you. Then the next service, if you just do an annual service, then that will cost you £195, which strikes me again is not a bad price at all. I pay more than that, for example, on my baby Panigale. So £195 for a normal annual service. That's not if you've got to the 10,000th anniversary, because on the 10,000, 20, 30, 40 and 50,000 mile anniversaries, there are different costs. So let me just talk you through those. I hope you follow this. It sounds a bit complicated. So on the 10,000 mile service, that's going to cost you £325 instead of the usual £195 for the annual service. On the 20,000 service, that's going to be £660. Now getting quite expensive. Then on the 30,000, you're back to £325. On the 40, it's £325. On the 50, £325. Then when you get to the 60,000, it's £660 again. So on those 10,000 mile sort of anniversaries, if you like, you get a more expensive service. But if you're only doing 3,000 or 4,000 miles a year and you just have an annual service, then that's £195. So a little bit complicated, but I hope that all made sense. So if you add those numbers all up, you come up with a sort of an annual cost of ownership figure. So what I've assumed here is in the first year, you wouldn't do the 10,000 miles, and I've said that, so the cost of servicing would be 60 for the 500 mile one, plus 195, so £255 for servicing for the first year. Next was the insurance at £486, and of course the tax at £85. Add that together, that's £826 per annum, just to keep the bike in the garage. That's without petrol, without running it anywhere, and without taking into account any depreciation. So again, £826 per annum, or £68.83 a month to keep the bike, which actually, again, I've done this calculation for a number of other bikes, that actually is a pretty good price for a bike of this size and type.
So this is a big old bike then, 1200cc, so What's it like for fuel economy? Well, I've been riding the bike now for a couple of weeks. Mix of riding, some fast roads, some country lanes, some longer journeys, some shorter stuff, and I'm averaging, according to the onboard computer, 41 miles per gallon. I've also been riding it in a mix of riding modes as well, mostly in rain mode actually, so you'd expect the MPG figure to be quite favourable, but 41 miles per gallon, I'm not sure that's a great number, is it? Just for comparison purposes, out of my GS I get about 45 miles per gallon. I didn't think that was very good. So from a fuel economy point of view, the Tiger's not that brilliant at 41 miles per gallon in my experience over the last couple of weeks. In fact, I own 3 cars and they all do better miles per gallon than that. So let's find out what she's like at the fuel station, if there's any surprises there. The only reason I mention it is because this bike has the keyless system on it, so you just have the key fob in your pocket to start and stop it. Now where do I need to go for fuel? That way. Which is all very well, but of course when it comes to fueling up you have to use the key, because this has got a lock, I notice, under here. So we'll go and give that a try, see how that works, and then also just see how quickly the fuel gauge picks up on this. Triumphs sometimes have a little bit of a delay between actually filling them up and noticing they've been filled up. It's not a big deal, it's just something that amuses me. It'll be interesting to see if the big 1200 still has that, or whether they fix that. Right then, where do I go here? Make sure I'm not about to put my foot down on a load of slippery diesel. Okay, up with the cappy thing. Find the key, which I have secreted about me. See, this is kind of where the whole keyless thing falls down. Here we go, here's the fob, it's quite fancy. Right, let's give her some juice. That one. Why doesn't that want to go in? Oh, I see, it's got a little bar to stop you pushing it all the way in, fair enough. Right, I'll just fill her up and go and pay, and then come back and see how the fuel gauge is doing with regards to registering that we filled her up. Of course, this is where the keyless thing does come in. You can just jump back on the bike, start her up without faffing about with your keys and your gloves. Stand up, bring her to life, start her up. Okay, just washing the fuel gauge now. It's going up from empty, look. Is it going to climb all the way? Oh, it stopped halfway. Interesting. Okay, we'll see how that works then. I know it's not a big deal, and some people have said to me, why do you always mention that it doesn't register that it's full up? It just amuses me at this day and age. Modern bikes don't notice when they're full up with fuel. Well, modern Triumphs anyway. Okay, it's going up towards the top now, look, and now it's saying we're full, so it's pretty quick to notice. It's not a big deal. What I am interested in seeing is what the range is saying, and now, according to the little onboard computer, got a range of 221 miles with a full tank, which is a pretty respectable range, it has to be said. Okay, she's just settling down, and the range has now gone to 217, but nonetheless, if we can assume you're going to get over 200 miles out of a tank, then that's a very usable range for a bike like this that you're going to go touring on. So thumbs up to Triumph for that one. So on faster roads, motorways and dual carriageways, the big old Tiger 1200, absolutely no issue at all. Massive amount of power out of the engine, so you can keep up with traffic, of course, at high speeds, so that's just not an issue. And really good weather protection on here as well. You've got this adjustable screen that you can adjust on the fly. You have to set it up on the TFT in order to get to the screen adjustment setting, and then use the little joystick here to actually move the screen up and down. So I've got it fully up now, and I'm in a bubble of calm. We'll just bring it down. Okay, there we go, that's on its lowest setting, and I've now got turbulent air hitting about halfway up my helmet, but still, to be honest, not too bad. Certainly no buffet or hitting me on the shoulders, and you could ride, you know, quite comfortably like this with the screen in its lower position. But personally, I prefer it fully up, because then you're in that, as I say, that bubble of calm. And the beauty of it is, when it is fully up, you're not looking through the screen either. You're still looking over it, yet all the airflow is going over the top of your head. So yeah, faster roads on this machine, not a problem. You could do hours and hours and cover huge miles on this bike at silly high speeds if you're in a country that allowed you to do that. But certainly here in the UK at 70 miles an hour, then yeah, you can sit on the motorway all day. Lovely stuff on the motorway. So of course, one of the features of these types of big old adventure bikes are their off-road capability. Now, when I've done long-term reviews on adventure bikes before, I've often had people say to me a couple of things. One, why didn't you take it off-road? And two, what's it like to stand up on? So I better answer those two questions now as far as the Tiger 1200 is concerned. Well, to stand up on, let's just do that. She's absolutely beautiful. The balance is lovely. The pegs are really grippy on here. They've got nice big proper off-road pegs. And standing up on the bike is just lovely. You can almost do it no-handed. I'm not going to attempt it, but your legs grip into the tank nicely, and it feels very, very neutral position when you're standing up. So off-road or not, standing up is just useful if you're on a long journey, just to stretch your legs, I find. So yeah, standing up on the bike's lovely. And then the question about off-road. Why haven't I taken the bike off-road? Well, it's linked to the to that point that I made earlier about the bike being heavy. Now, I have taken a GS off-road under instruction, and that was fine. Or it has to be said, if given the choice, I'd rather take a lighter bike off-road. Now, this bike feels quite heavy at slow speeds, and it's not my bike, obviously, it's a loan bike, so really what I don't want to do is drop the thing. So, and also around here at this time of year, any green lanes tend to be closed. They don't really open up until April time. So I haven't had the chance to take the bike off-road. There's not that many off-road spots around here, and anyway, to be honest, even if it was the middle of the summer and the few green lanes that are available were open, I still wouldn't take it off-road, because it's an expensive bike. I don't feel confident on it enough, given its weight. If I dropped it, I'll be able to lift it up again, and of course I don't want to damage it. So sorry about being a wimp there, folks, but I think you'll find most people that shell out the money for one of these ain't going to take them off-road either, and that's why I'm not. So what about touring on the big old Tiger 1200 then? Well, of course, the majority of these bikes that are sold will be used for long distance travel touring, as opposed to off-road type activity. So as you'd expect, it's an absolutely amazing bike for long distances. Comfortable seat, what with the seat heater as well, and the heated grips if it's a cold day. Really comfortable, massive weather protection. I'm riding here with my visor open. Yeah, I've got no wind in my face off this big adjustable electric screen. Absolutely beautiful mile muncher. Also the panniers, quite sizable on it, and also great provision for a pillion. However, having said all that, if you're a smaller chap like myself, I'm 5'8" and about 12 stone, I do find the bike very heavy, and although like this at the moment, one up with no loaded panniers on, it feels fine. I do find whenever I come to a junction and I stop, I have that feeling in my mind, am I going to drop the bike? And I think if I had heavily laden panniers on it and a pillion, I've not ridden the bike with a pillion for this reason, then I just think it would be far too heavy for me. The bike does feel heavy at slow speeds, well, it's sort of walking pace whenever you come up to a junction or whatever. And if you're touring, that would be a problem for me. So if you're a 6-foot rugby playing guy, no problem, touring on this, absolutely fantastic. If you're a smaller person, then you might want to look for a bike that's a little bit lighter, or one that carries its weight a little bit lower down.
This bike is a big old beast, it has to be said, and lugging it around is not easy. I'm sort of a medium-sized fella, 5'8", 12 stone, so not a massive fella, but at the same time, not an absolute 9-stone weakling. And I must say, I find this bike very heavy to shift around. You know, it is possible to do, but every time I move it around, I have a bit of a concern that I'm going to drop it. Anyway, I've just got to reposition the bike now, so let's get it off the main stand and see how it goes. Okie dokie. Come on, girl, you can do it. Crikey, yeah, definitely not a bike for girls. So at the start of the video, I said that I would also give you a little rundown of the findings that I've kind of made on the bike, having ridden it now for the last couple of weeks and got to know the bike a little bit better than you would if you just did maybe a 1 hour test ride. So there are a number of pros and cons on the bike, and I'll start with the negatives, the things that I found that I don't like about the bike so much. First off, and this is the biggie and really the only significant one, I guess, is just the weight of it. I hinted at it before. It's 242 kilograms dry. That makes it a pretty heavy old bike. It's heavier than a BMW GS Adventure. And now if you have the panniers on it as well and a pillion, that is going to be one beast of a machine to move around. As I mentioned earlier, I found it quite difficult to move around, you know, when it's on your driveway or in your garage or whatever. It's absolutely fine once you're moving. On the move, the bike feels light as you like, and it's brilliant, as do all these big bikes. But yeah, at a standstill, for me personally, it's just a bit too heavy. A little bit more top heavy than the GS that I'm used to, and I just don't feel stable when I come to a standstill at traffic lights and things like that. So for me, that would actually put me off buying the bike. So the weight is the biggest negative. Allied to that is also the height of the bike. Now, it has got an adjustable seat. I've got it on its lowest possible setting, but even on its low setting, I'm still on tippy toes, and I think that's because the seat is relatively wide at the front. So, you know, your legs don't go straight down. So again, it's just a little bit too high for me. I'm sure you can probably get an even lower seat or a lowered suspension version. I'm not sure, I don't need to check that. But certainly as the standard bike, even with the adjustable seat, is a little bit too high for my liking. The other thing that I noticed about the bike fairly early on, which surprised me a bit, but perhaps shouldn't have done, is that when you brake hard, the front of the bike does dive quite a lot. Again, this is something I'm not used to. I mentioned at the start of the video I'll be kind of comparing it with a view to how it compares to my GS. Well, of course, on the GS, it's got that funny BMW front suspension. You can brake as hard as you like, it doesn't dive at all. So I was a little bit surprised when I first did a bit of sort of emergency braking and the front dived down on this. So something else I'm not keen on such a big bike. The other thing that I don't like, I mentioned it earlier, the panniers. Although they look quite, you know, meaty, they look very, you know, Ewan McGregor, don't they? Which I quite like about them. The finish on them, being just aluminium, is going to be difficult to keep looking nice and new. You might not care about that. You might want them to look sort of battle scarred, as these ones do a little bit. You probably can't see it on the camera at the moment, but close up, these are quite scratched and marked, and obviously these are relatively new panniers. So that would actually annoy me. They're difficult to keep in nick. That's just a you know, personal thing. Also, they're not actually that big. Useful as top loaders, but you can't get an awful lot of stuff in them. So that's another thing. The heated grips. Now, I mentioned on my initial review, I don't know if you saw my first impressions review of the bike, but I mentioned that I really like the heated grips and the fact that Triumph build in the switch for them. And I do like that idea in concept, but in practice, it's not so good. On a cold day when you tend to be wearing your bigger gloves, that little switch there to switch on the heated grips is really hard to feel through the gloves. I've tried it with various pairs of gloves, and it's the same problem. You can't really feel where that is, so it's a bit hit and miss to switch that on. You do get an indication on the dash, so you know if you've got it switched on or not, so that's quite good, but it is a bit fiddly. So the heated grips aren't quite as good as I at first thought. The other thing I've really struggled with throughout the whole time with this is the biting point on the clutch. It's really high. The clutch has got an adjustable lever, so it's possible that it's just this machine, it could be adjusted out. But swapping between bikes, as I do quite a lot, every time I've got on this one, it's caught me out how far out you have to let the clutch for the biting point to come in. So that's something I've not been keen on the bike. Fuel economy, we will get some good stuff in a minute, by the way, it's not all bad. Fuel economy, I was getting, according to the bike, around 41 miles per gallon, which again, for a motorcycle, that's not brilliant, is it? Again, it's not particularly bad. Lots of these big bikes do similar sorts of numbers, but I've got 3 cars and they all do better fuel economy than that. Okay, bikes aren't built for fuel economy, modern cars are, but nonetheless, 41 miles per gallon, don't think that's a brilliant fuel economy thing. Next negative I've noted here is just a personal thing, it's the looks of the bike. It is improved, I think, on the previous 2017 model. They've done some better things with the styling. This particular colour doesn't do it any favours. The red bike looks lovely, I think, nice and glossy. But this particular one in this particular colour, don't think it looks great. Although this screen, for example, is very effective, it doesn't add to the looks. It's just a bit big and wobbly, and I'm not too keen. So overall, on the looks front, I think, you know, if you want an adventure bike that looks good, you've got to be looking at Multistradas, really. Or even, dare I say it again, the GS, I think, looks better than this bike. So sorry, Triumph, didn't win on the looks front. And then again, sort of linked to that, and this is possibly just specific to me again, but cleaning. All adventure bikes are difficult to clean. They've got a lot of scaffolding and stuff, but this one in particular I found pretty hard to clean. I've cleaned it twice since I've had it. The shaft drive is quite difficult to get out. There's a lot of scaffolding, a lot of nooks and crannies. You're going to need a bike dryer. Just be warned, if you get one of these and you're a bit OCD about keeping your bike clean, you're going to be doing an awful lot of cleaning. All right, that's it for the negatives. Let's get on to the more positive stuff. Okay, so much for all this negativity. What about the positives on the bike then? And there are plenty of those. There's plenty of things about this bike to love. So I made a note again of them. So first thing, the engine, the big old triple engine, absolutely amazing. Triumph really know how to do triples, don't they? And this one is no exception. It's had lots of changes for 2018 and the thing absolutely flies. When you wind it up, the bike goes like stink. It really has got a lot of shove, this bike, and at the top end it sounds nice as well. I guess the only downside of that is it is at the top end, and it's you know, once you get to sort of silly speeds, so maybe not completely practical. I'd personally rather have it lower down the range where you can use it, but there is no doubt that is a lovely, lovely engine. So for me, the engine and the grunt that this bike has is a really positive point. Next thing, beautiful handling. I mentioned this before. For such a big, heavy bike, I've criticised its size and its weight, but my goodness me, the thing handles really, really well. Way better than it has any right to do so, given its size and weight. It really is a nice bike on the move, so handling top marks. The smoothness of the engine as well is just something I want to point out. Again, it being a triple, it's that ideal compromise between the smoothness of a creamy four-cylinder bike and the character of a twin-cylinder bike. So yeah, lovely and smooth, as well as having plenty of shove, that engine. The quick shifter on this, wow, that is a brilliant bit of kit. Again, both up and down, it's got an auto blipper as well as a quick shifter. It's one of the best versions of that I've seen. Again, compared to the one on my bike, on my GS, which is a bit agricultural at best, this thing is smooth as you like. Even at slow speeds, you can change gears without using the clutch. It really is nice. So top marks for the quick shifter. The fact that it's shaft driven, again, what is it with some other manufacturers, and I'm thinking of you, KTM, that build adventure bikes that don't have shaft drive? So great, this bike is shaft driven, so that's again a big plus for this as an adventure bike. Oh, the heated seat, I'm a real convert to those, and the heated seat on this works lovely. It works both on the front and back, so if you've got a passenger, they can have a nice warm bum as well. Works really nicely, and once you've tried one on a cold day, you'll never go back. People have said to me, why have a heated seat? I've never noticed that my backside gets cold on a bike before, but trust me, if you keep your bum warm, your core is warm, and they really are a great thing. So the heated seat, small point it may seem, but really is a great thing about this bike, really like that. The electronics on this machine, that's the next thing, absolutely laden with them. It's got the latest Bosch cornering ABS, it's got that incredible TFT screen, it's got absolutely, Triumph have thrown the electronics catalogue at this one and really have done a good job. They've really upped the game on the electronics. I don't think there's another adventure bike that I can think of that is quite as well spec'd from an electronics point of view, and they all work beautifully as well. Even things like the cornering lights and stuff is a great feature. Comfort, generally speaking, when you're riding this bike, you ain't going to be getting uncomfortable. That seat, I mentioned it was a bit wide and stops getting your feet down, but the upside of that is it means it's very, very comfortable. Lovely bike for long distances. You are going to cruise on the motorways and the autobahns on this without any problems whatsoever, and indeed, if you choose to take the thing off-road, it's going to be comfortable. The heated grips, the weather protection from this massive front end, the heated seat, as I've already mentioned, makes for a really, really comfortable ride. That smooth engine as well. You ain't going to have any problems with comfort. It is superlative when it comes to comfort. The pannier connections, I've criticised the panniers a little bit today, but the way that they actually connect is very straightforward. The way they just clip on and off, very easy. Some other panniers can be really fiddly, so those actually very good in that respect, so worth pointing out. And then last but not least, well, it's a Triumph. I just love Triumph generally, and I just think it's a great brand to be associated with, so great that it's a Triumph as well, that we can come up with this sort of bike in this country now. Okay, so there we have it. That's my long-term living with type review of the big old Triumph Tiger 1200. Must just thank Triumph again very much for letting me borrow the bike and really getting under the skin of the machine and learning a little bit more about it. Really enjoyed having the bike. So how would I summarise it then? Well, number one, it's better in every way than the old outgoing Tiger 1200. It's got better electronics, better looks, basically everything about the bike is better. The engine is sweet as you like, it goes really, really well. Lovely in that respect, but unfortunately for me, it's still a very heavy bike. Even though they've shaved, I think it was 16 kilograms off the bike overall, for me it still feels a little bit too heavy for me to be comfortable with. So I'm afraid if you were to compare this against, say, the GS, which carries its weight low down, if I were to buy a new bike now of this style, it would be a GS, not a Triumph Tiger. Sorry about that, Triumph. Okay, I hope you found that of interest, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Until then, this has been the Mr. and Fly. Cheerio.